This is Money Moves on VSiN, the sports betting network.
Good news, 1 week in and we're still a show. Stormy, Buonantony, Jonathan Von Tobel with you on this Monday edition of Money Moves as we welcome you into VSiN, the sports betting network. Live in downtown Las Vegas, Circa Resort and Casino as always. Coming off a busy weekend too, JVT, we had some unbelievable finishes in the NHL. The NBA's second round is already underway. Scotty Scheffler wins by $1 million in the CJ Cup. And then we look at the Kentucky Derby over the weekend. Want to give a shout out. We have to Mike Somich and all of the crew that put together the Kentucky Derby betting guide. He hits the superfecta. Sovereignty wins it over Journalism, who comes in second. Baeza, late add to the field comes third. And then Final Gambit in fourth. $1 paid $1,680. Wow.
Yeah, good for him. I saw that over the weekend. It was absolutely tremendous. A good call by him. And a race that was actually pretty fun. I'm not a big horse racing guy, but obviously for the Kentucky Derby, you lock in and get ready to go. And watching that transpire and the way it went down, it was a very entertaining race over the weekend.
Very entertaining. And I was curious how it was all going to go with the mud and everything.
Yep.
And it ended up being really fun and exciting. And we talked about Journalism, right? And the potential of them potentially not winning just given the field size and all of that stuff. But to throw it in, if you're doing any of these boxes, throw it in, make sure that you keep that horse incorporated. And it worked out.
That's right. So hopefully that continues on for our next big horse race. Preakness is next.
Yes,
is that correct?
The Preakness,
okay.
The Belmont. See, we know the Triple Crown
That's
ones.
Right. Yeah.
We're the horse racing casuals. That's why we have to count on guys like Mike Somich and the whole crew there. I did want to check on you, though. How are we holding up after the Clippers this weekend?
Oh, it's fine. I think I told everybody that would listen. I didn't trust them. I don't think there was a reason that you should have trusted them. This is a team that lacked energy, that lacked the requisite gumption, I think, in certain situations to pull off those sort of wins. I went on Tim's show and even said the same thing, which was, look, on paper, this team has everything you need to potentially win this game, but there is nothing about what they have done up to this point that would make you trust that they're capable of pulling that off in that situation. And they didn't. They not only did they not show up, they got completely blown out. They were never really in it. And I think there's a lot you can look at, but either way, Nuggets move on to what should be a very entertaining series between them and the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Yes, it will, but unfortunate for the Clippers because they were one of a handful of teams that has been considered a contender in the West with that late surge to the season, getting healthy with Kawhi and everything. And now in the Western Conference, it looks like all things are showing up. OKC, could there be one team maybe that is a big threat? We'll get into that with our Overreaction Monday segment, Call Me Crazy, a little bit later on in the show. One of many things we have still to come over the course of the next 2 hours. So if you would, producer Corey, let's set the table for the day. Time to run it down.
It's time for the top headlines and topics of the day. This is The Rundown.
So lots to get to today, including a decent-sized card in Major League Baseball. I've got a 10-game slate coming up today, including a couple notable series kicking off. Padres at Yankees, Giants at Cubs. Cubs, though, JVT, another starter goes down in the rotation. They're already down Steele. Shota Imanaga exits yesterday with a hamstring injury.
Yeah, there's injuries abound everywhere. The Yankees, too, are starting to get beat up even more and more. I think it's Volpe now who's going to miss some time, or at least his day-to-day. But you're right. These series on paper look very, very fun. My guy, Landon Roop, we talked about him last start, that the underlying metrics paint the picture of a guy that's got some good stuff going for him, and yet he can't get any luck to go his way. So very curious to see what it looks like here against Chicago. And some of these other teams, look, it's a big number because they're they're a very good team and the Marlins stink. But the Dodgers are just beating the crap out of everybody now at this point. Let's see if that continues against Sandy Alcantara, who is working his way back from Tommy John and has looked absolutely abysmal so far.
We will go through that card, and we'll get into some of the bet splits as well with VSiN's own Josh Applebaum, who will join us in hour 2. Also, we mentioned it off the top, but plenty of NBA to discuss. The second round already underway, and might this round be more competitive? Three of last year's 4 second-round series did end up being upsets. The odds, though, certainly would indicate that's not the case in 2025. Some big series prices, but JVT, unexpected Game 1 road upset last night. The Pacers beat Cleveland 121-112 as 8-point road dogs.
Yeah, that's going to happen when you hit nearly 60% of your three-point attempts. That was an incredible shooting performance from Indiana yesterday. And there's a lot of, when we get to the full recap of that, I think there's a lot of underlying metrics and just signs that when you looked at that game for Indiana, I mean, on the surface, if you're going to double up your opponent from beyond the arc, well, actually more than that, and then still be in that range where you're going to potentially lose that game, I mean, I think there's a lot to look at for the course of this series. That Indiana, good thing you won that, but holy smokes, you're going to be able to continue to do that from beyond the arc because they got killed inside.
Yeah, we shall see. Maybe a good price now on Cleveland if you're looking for a little bit of a cheaper series bet there. And we'll dive into all of the round 2 series prices available. Obviously, Game 7 rounding out last night with the Warriors and Rockets. And let's keep it rolling with the Game 7 talk, because in the Stanley Cup playoffs last night, don't call it a comeback. Stars and Jets deliver a pair of wild Game 7 comebacks over the weekend. Dominic Moore tweeted this out. The first 106 years of NHL playoffs historically, we saw just 3 2-goal comebacks in the third period to win a Game 7. We had 2 in the last 2 days. Yep. And let's discuss how it happened. So Dallas was down 2-0 with 8 minutes into the third period before Mikko Rantanen scores 1 to get them on the board. Wyatt Johnston then 6 minutes later hits the power play goal. Rantanen completes the job with an empty netter, so he scores 3 goals in that final back half of the third period for them to win it. And then last night, the Winnipeg Jets said, hold my beer. Jets down 3-1 with less than 2 minutes remaining. I'm on the edge of my seat on my couch saying, okay, well, unfortunately, it looks like the Jets can't pull a Dallas Stars. Guess I was wrong, because they scored 2 goals in those last couple minutes, including one with 1.6 seconds remaining on the clock. We go to overtime. Goalies and D stand tall. Double OT. Yep. Adam Lowry plays hero. Great tip shot 16 minutes into the second overtime. And now those two teams will face off against one another in round 2.
Yeah, this is this one right here. I watched the whole thing, and this was an incredible performance, because I know that you were in on the Blues for this series, or at least the tail end of it, and it looked like you called it pretty well. They blew them out in Game 6, and then, of course, you come in Game 7, they have this lead, and you're thinking, all right, here we go. I don't know, man. It looked like a team that maybe let up a little bit at the end, because you figured, all right, we got this thing, and ultimately you give that up, and it's really hard to get that back, I think, when you get to that extra period after blowing it. But I thought after what looked like an abysmal start for Hellebuyck there at the beginning of that game, all of a sudden he really, especially in that first overtime period, to my novice eye, looked like he really locked in. Like, there were a lot of really solid saves. Obviously kept them afloat the entire time, allowed them to get back into that after some shaky open goals. And then just like that, here we are, they move on. For a team, too, that, talking to a lot of people, as we've discussed, a lot is expected of this Winnipeg Jets team heading into the postseason, and to have to hold on, come back, and then eventually win the way they did, now move on to the next round. But that was a very impressive effort from Winnipeg. I don't think there's any doubt.
Had a lot of Jets fans saying, where was this Connor Hellebuyck the entire series, especially on the road in St. Louis?
I thought they were going to bench him. Yeah. Right at the beginning of the game, you're at, and you're watching him. I'm like, what are we doing?
I said on Friday, any other goalie at this point in this, would have been benched already in the series. Yep. But because of who he is, and he's going to win the Vezina Trophy for the second year in a row, third time in his career, he's the best goalie in the world right now. You trust that he can stand up for you, and luckily in Game 7, in critical moments at the end, he finally did. But you mentioned the way that I was sweating it with St. Louis. I think that they, let off the gas. That's what happens when you kind of play prevent style late in a game, and it ultimately cost them. So there goes all of those good plus money tickets that we were able to get on the Blues and that. But sometimes it is what it is, and now that Jet Star series gets very interesting. But let's go back to the NBA for you, because the Warriors are able to close things out. Not quite as exhilarating a finish against the Rockets, but 103-89, the final there. And after the first quarter, it wasn't really close. They led by as many as 20 in this one. Yeah.
Well, look, I think there's 2 things that really stick out about what we just watched in that series. The first of which is, it was a lot of people were asking the questions, the Rockets are the 2 seed. Why don't they get more respect? Why don't they get priced like some of the teams, like their contemporaries? And the problem is that this is a team that statistically had a very poor half-court offense throughout the course of the regular season. And you saw that, a half-court offensive rating of 78. That's abysmal. That ranks in the 7th percentile in terms of what they put up in this Game 7 against Golden State. That was a big reason why. Warriors decided to throw out a zone defense for a good chunk of this game. Rockets had nothing against it. Absolutely nothing. They don't really have anybody they can trust to score. It also helps when somebody shows up for you, too. And it wasn't Steph Curry, but it was Buddy Hield, who comes out, guns a-blazing for the Warriors, goes 9 of 11 from beyond the arc, and essentially grabs the team by the scruff of their neck and carries them to victory with 33 points in the game overall. Hield was incredible. And
especially after doing nothing in Game 6.
Right, yeah. So, look, sometimes it's that easy, right? Like we just talked about with the Indiana Pacers. Sometimes you just got to come out and hit 19 3-pointers and you're going to win a game. And sometimes you just need Buddy Hield to show up and hit 9 of his 11 3-point attempts to help carry you to victory when your guy Steph Curry isn't really doing much throughout the entire game, where Butler was fine but not really giving you much. I think this is sometimes what playoff performances are made of, and this is exactly what you got. He'll went out there and performed well, and now the Rockets are on their way back, and the Warriors are now on to the second round, where many expected, except against an opponent that not many expected in the Minnesota Timberwolves.
Yeah, and real quickly before we move on to what that next series is, Draymond Green was on the podium talking about how they felt embarrassed in Game 6, wanted to close things out strong.
I pouted way too much last game. So I spent the last 2 days embarrassed just at what I gave to the game, what I gave to the world. I was embarrassed. And so I've been dying since the last game ended to get out on the floor and prove who I am. You know, one thing about this league, you're never done proving who you are until you're done, completely finished. And so I wanted to come out and prove again just who I am. With poise, but with the same fire, same tenacity, but poise. And I think I delivered that and gave our guys something to follow.
And hey, give Draymond credit, held the Rockets 3 of 17 shooting as the contested defender, including Alperen Şengün going 2 of 8 when contested by Green. But the fouls and techs and all of that are going to be a problem. They add up. Yes. And is that something that should be a concern for Golden State next round?
Yeah, of course. I think does he have 7 so far already? I think I'll have to get the exact number for you. But they are, and by the way, he was so embarrassed he got called for a technical in this game too. So he wasn't that embarrassed. But no, those are going to add up. So we'll see if he actually gets burned by it. But look, Draymond's Draymond. He's not going to be able to contain himself. We know that at this point right now. But you mentioned the statistics defensively. Showed out in a really big way, helped the win, and now they move on in a series that I think will be short.
Yeah, Game 1 coming up tomorrow against the Timberwolves, and that's a hell of a tease. They are already getting 6.5 in that first game, total 208.5. We will discuss the 2 NBA games coming up tonight, as well as the start of round 2 in the NHL postseason. And still to come this hour, Zach Cohen of VSiN as well with his thoughts on the NBA series prices.
This is an ad by BetterHelp. BetterHelp recently surveyed over 16,000 people and found that while 75% of people believe it's wise to seek support, only 27% of Americans are in therapy, and people stay silent to avoid being judged. BetterHelp has over 10 years of experience matching you with the right therapist. Because we're all better with help. Visit BetterHelp.com/stopthestigma for their first ever State of Stigma report. The latest in mental health research.
For the ones who get it done, the most important part is the one you need now. And the best partner is the one who can deliver. That's why millions of maintenance and repair pros trust Grainger. Because we have professional-grade supplies for every industry, even hard-to-find products. And we have same-day pickup and next-day delivery on most orders. But most importantly, we have an unwavering commitment to help keep you up and running. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
You're watching Money Moves here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
We're back here on Money Moves. JVT and Stormy Buonantony with you live in downtown Las Vegas. Going to get into a little round 2 action here today. We got 2 games in the NBA, 1 in the NHL, and we already actually started round 2 last night with the Pacers and Cleveland Cavaliers going head-to-head. The Pacers actually trailed with about 6 minutes and 30 seconds left in the fourth quarter, but ended the game on a 20-10 run to take Game 1 on the road as an 8-point dog, 121-112. Darius Garland didn't play for the 3rd straight game due to a toe injury. But what were some of your biggest takeaways from last night, and is there something to more than just the shooting from Indiana?
Yeah, I mean, that's got to be the first thing, though, right? I mean, Indiana goes 19 of 36 from beyond the arc. They make 10 more three-pointers than their opponent, Cleveland. So, you do the math. You outscore your opponent by 30 points in one facet of the game. So you're thinking, all right, this is going to be a blowout. But like you mentioned, they trailed at one point late in that game. And I think this is going to be the one thing that really does stick out about this series so far. It was a good performance. They obviously hit so many three-point attempts. They didn't generate a ton of uncontested looks. If you go to the NBA tracking data, it was a minimal amount of uncontested looks. So a lot of contested shots go down. The other part is, Stormy, they gave up 70 points in the paint. Cleveland had 70 points in the paint against this team. And when you talk about the turnover battle, you overcame your turnover issue. You committed 9 more turnovers. So in other words, this might seem unfair to some. I would mark this as a somewhat unsustainable performance for the Indiana Pacers. I mean, you were very good, and the experience, maybe that helps you out, but I don't know if you bank on that. And, you come out of this and you go, okay, look, if you're Cleveland, you've got to be able to contain them, run them off the three-point line a little bit more. They ended up taking 36 three-point attempts. Like, you want to kind of run them off, make sure they're not hitting those, whatever it is. But on the other side, I don't think you're feeling great if you're Indiana, because you're coming out of this going, we gave up 70 points in the paint, and that advantage probably isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Donovan Mitchell was great outside of his three-point shooting. He was one of 11, I think it was. It ended up being from beyond the arc, but he was killing them inside, getting inside with some regularity. So that's going to be something worth monitoring here as we move forward is, all right, great shooting performance, but given the massive edge you had to only win by 9 and have the other issues that you had in this game, I would be very much worried if you're Indiana about what comes next in game 2. And then, of course, you have the other one, which is, does Darius Garland come back because he's still dealing with his toe injury, ended up not playing. But, if you're somebody like me that laid 1.5 games with the Cavaliers, not the ideal start, but you're going to be fine. It's a long series. We'll see what happens here in this next game. But that, to me, I think is one of the big things. You had such a massive advantage, yet you only won by 9. You gave up 70-point paints. Let's see how this works out over the course of the series.
And speaking to those three-point performances, I'm not sure you're going to get, 57% in the playoffs that we've seen from Andrew Nembhard to this point compared to 29% in the regular season. This is not his normal output.
People would call him a playoff riser, I think is the term that people keep saying. And the guy has been great, so we'll see. But, you mentioned, 7 of 10, 5 of 6. It was insane watching every single one of those shots go down. Aaron Nesmith's hitting above the break threes, no problem. It was wild. Every time they pulled up, I was like, that's probably going in. And sure enough, it did. They were shooting nearly 60% from 3 at one point, and yet it was a 1-point game. So I do think that's going to be something to monitor here as you move forward with Indiana. And if the 3-point shots aren't going down, what does the rest of that game look like?
So I know you mentioned not an ideal start for the -1.5 games, but the Cavs now updated series price -210, and that -1.5 games plus 140 if what you're saying is true and that Cleveland kind of comes back to form and that Indiana comes back down.
Yeah. I'm right now, if you're down by 1, I don't know if I'm rushing to lay 1.5, but it is a cheap and more palatable price for Cleveland, obviously around $2 to win the series. I still think they're in very good form. Again, when you look at the ability to score in the paint, I think the ability to guard, especially when it comes to Pascal Siakam in a game like this, Siakam only had 17 points, 6 of 15 shooting, and I thought guys like Kevin Mobley and Jared Allen did a relatively good job against him. And I think over the course of this series, that plays out more often in Cleveland's favor. Again, the ability to attack this backcourt, Indiana's backcourt defensively, for guys like Donovan Mitchell to continue to touch paint, get open looks for his guys. I think those things will reverse themselves. We should also note that Cleveland, a very good three-point shooting team, went 9 of 38 from beyond the arc in that game too. So I wouldn't say no if you wanted to go out there and lay it. I'm already in the position, obviously, where I did. But if anything, the Cavaliers are not dead, obviously, and you're going to feel, I think, still pretty confident, especially with Garland potentially making his way back.
The market so far in the NBA has loved the zigzag theory, and we're moving that way already in game 2. Cavs, we talked about it, closed 8-point favorites in game 1 at home. Now they're 9.5 in game 2 in the bounce back spot, total 229.5. We also have 2 spreads in that same realm coming up in tonight's game. The Boston Celtics laying 9 in game 1 against the Knicks. OKC laying 9.5 in game 1 against the Nuggets.
Yeah, let's start with Denver and Oklahoma City, just because situationally it's a very bad spot for Denver to be in. Generally, you play a game 7 now. The game 7 wasn't very competitive, so maybe that situation is not as negative as before. But to play a long knockout, drag-out series with the Los Angeles Clippers, get all the way to 7 games, and then the second you're done winning at home, you got to get on a plane, you got to get out to OKC after 1 day off, you're right back in it against an Oklahoma City Thunder team that has been sitting back and waiting for you for a week, getting ready to go. Generally, coming off of a Game 7 is a negative situational spot for the team that is coming off of that 7-game series. So this screams Oklahoma City. I was talking to Kelly Bidlin right before we came on the air. He and I are both, I was watching them. We're on the same side. I laid 9.5 for the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think the Thunder are a much better team. We can get to that in the call me crazy part about it when it comes to the series as a whole. But situationally, seems like a pretty big negative to play that Game 7 now for 1 day off, go hit the road and take on a higher-seeded team that is coming off of a sweep and well-rested.
I've got some numbers that can back that up for you. The team with 1 day rest against a team with 8 or more days rest in the playoffs last 40 years. 0-6 in Game 1 of the series. Average margin of defeat, 20.3 points per game.
Yeah. I mean, now I do wonder, I don't know if you have it, but like the margin of victory in the Game 7 compared to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, again, this is a game in which they were blasting the Clippers. Really, like you kind of saw the writing on, I don't know about you, maybe I'm just really pessimistic, but I saw the writing on the wall very early in that game. And so, when Russell Westbrook is purposely getting teed up in the third quarter and telling them to get their ass home, all that kind of stuff, you kind of saw what was coming. So it wasn't as taxing, but still to play in those situations with only a day off. And OKC is a very good team, man. Like they're so much more well-equipped defensively along the perimeter to handle the Jamal Murray and other role players that they have. They're not going to shut down Jokic. Nobody is. But given what Jokic had to play through at the end of that series in terms of minutes load and then coming back here and playing in a situation like this where he's going to have a lot more on his shoulders too, it just doesn't seem like the best spot for him.
I know you love Boston in the series, as does just about everyone, and certainly odds makers who put them out to an $8 favorite in this set with the Knicks, but laying 9 here at home in Game 1, total 213. Do you feel like similarly to OKC that they can handle a big number in Game 1?
Yeah, I don't really feel as strongly here. I feel stronger about the series than I do about the side for a game like this. But I'll say this, look, what I'm going to be curious about in this game and then zooming out to the series as a whole is what is New York's offense going to look like? I was going through some of the numbers over the weekend, especially in that series against Detroit. A lot of the things that really stuck out, their isolation rate in terms of like the frequency of plays in which they ran through an ISO, that was way up in comparison to the regular season. Their assist rate was way down. They only assisted on about 50% of made buckets against Detroit. Your eyes would tell you that it was a lot of just dribbling and trying to make something happen, especially if it was Jalen Brunson. And I don't think that's going to work here against Boston. Boston is a team that is going to be able to defend in ISO situations, trust their defenders. And if you're going to be willing to play that style of basketball against the Celtics, I think that really plays into their hands. I also think that when you look at the way the Boston operates on offense, there was only 2 teams in the regular season, Stormy, that Boston had a higher offensive rating against than New York. It was Portland and it was Phoenix. So in other words, they ran roughshod against New York in the regular season series. They were 4-0 against them, 3-1 straight up, 3-1 against the spread. They were covering big numbers against them. The Knicks did not have a very good answer for Boston's offense. That's the other part about this. The Knicks, against opponents with a top 10 net rating in the regular season, they were 6-16, and they were, I think, 23rd in defensive rating against those opponents. Boston, obviously, is one of those. I think the Knicks are really up against it here. So instead of maybe laying a big number, if you wanted to go Boston team total over, I think that is something that is they're capable of going over. They're capable of achieving, because I don't think this Knicks defense is going to be able to stop an offense that really ran over them in the regular season.
Okay, good note there. And we'll talk more NBA in just a little bit. Coming up after this timeout, we'll get to Zach Cohen, one of the great contributors and writers here at VSiN.com, get his thoughts not only on tonight's games, but some of these series prices that have stood out to him in round 2. And continuing that on, in addition to all of the great things that we do here at VSiN, the playoffs, there's no better time to check out Sharp Plays as well. Since 2011, Sharp Plays has been locked in on what real pros are betting, bets that are moving markets. When you sign up, you'll gain access to not only the plays and bets, but all of their powerful AI tools, betting reports, real-time alerts and updates via email or X, and perhaps most importantly, betting logs that are live and available to see on the site each and every day. Check the receipts when you head over to sharpplays.com. That's sharpplays.com. We'll also get into the NHL stuff a little bit later on. Coming up tonight, round 2 begins for the Panthers and Leafs. Florida, your defending Stanley Cup champs, laying -170 in the series. Tonight, a -125 road favorite in Game 1. It was interesting to see on these series prices these teams that were underdogs that had won their divisions and done all of that. So we'll get into some of the series prices and best bets there as well. We'll be right back on Money Moves.
You're watching Money Moves here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Some big spreads and big series prices here in round 2 of the NBA postseason. JVT, Stormy Buonantony with you back here on Money Moves. Excited to break it all down as Zach Cohen joins us here on the Progressive Guest Line. Senior editor and writer at VSiN.com, has a fresh new article up that just dropped on the website this morning. Zach, how are we doing?
I'm doing well. How about you guys?
Doing good. Excited to break down some of these games, especially since we got our first upset of round 2 already. Game 1 last night with the Indiana Pacers. Could either one of these big favorites in the Celtics or Thunder be on potential upset watch today? The odds certainly don't seem to think so.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I've had a really bad read on Denver. I thought Los Angeles was going to win that series last series, but I really would be surprised if the Thunder don't win this game pretty comfortably. After, like, I just think this Denver team is not coming in with I do think it's a really flawed team, even though they did beat the Clippers.
All right. Let me ask you this. For this game overall, anything in terms of player props that stick out to you?
Yeah, the only thing I have in this game is Russell Westbrook over 20.5 points, rebounds, and assists, which is something that he has now hit in 3 consecutive games. And he actually did average 26.4 points, rebounds, and assists in 4 meetings with Oklahoma City this season. And I kind of do think that because Denver's coming into this game with very little rest, one of the things they might opt to do is just kind of roll the ball out to Russ and hope that his, energy and organized chaos just kind of helps them find a little juice in the game. I think that that's, very possible heading into this one. It's obviously a Thunder team that is very, very good defensively. They're going to find ways to exploit Westbrook's lack of shooting at some point in this series, but I could see him having some success, attacking the basket, getting some rebounds, and dishing out some assists.
All right, so a year ago, the Oklahoma City Thunder were in a Western Conference semifinal series with the Dallas Mavericks, and they elected to play the math game with somebody named P.J. Washington, who turned into Ray Allen reincarnated. Does this happen again coming off a series in which Russ shot over 40% from 3 against the Clippers?
I don't think so. I mean, P.J. Washington is a very good shooter. Like, he kind of proved that in that series, and it has continued throughout. Westbrook is not going to continue to shoot 40+% from 3. I would be stunned if that happens. And even if he does, I still don't think that would be enough, just because it wouldn't be on a lot of attempts or anything. It would just be kind of knocking down 1 or 2 out of his 3 attempts. So I would just be really surprised if Westbrook continues to shoot this well.
Well, let's go to the first game of the doubleheader, Knicks at Celtics. And I know a lot of the conversation coming out of New York, that first series, is, well, if you had this hard a time against the Pistons, how's that going to look against Boston? How do you see this one shaking out?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a pretty quick series, maybe 5 or less games, honestly. I just think that Boston is going to be a little bit too good offensively. This Knicks team is, somewhat vulnerable on the defensive end. Obviously, they have some guys out there that can defend. Josh Hart, OG Anunoby, and Mikal Bridges are all very good individual defenders, but Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns are going to play 35-plus minutes every night, maybe more like 40-plus, and those guys really can't defend. So I think the Celtics are going to find ways to exploit that, and I do think that we saw the Knicks struggle a bit offensively against the Pistons last series, and this Celtics team is better defensively than that Detroit team is. Obviously, Brunson's going to be able to do what he does, in isolation, but they need to find ways to get other guys involved. I don't think they're going to be able to do it consistently. Having said that, I do really like the over in 1. I just think it's come down way too much from where it opened. It started at 217.5, down to 213 at DraftKings. I think that there's a lot of sharp money on the under, but I'm willing to go against it just based on what we saw in the regular season. These teams went 3-1 to the over in their 4 meetings. Every one of those games had a total of at least 221.5. That's way higher than what we're seeing tonight. Even the game that went under in the regular season, that was a game in which they combined to score 223. That total was 232. I just think it's a really weird number to see. I know that possessions have been down across the playoffs, but this Celtics team is going to come out firing after being outshot in the Magic series. And I do think that the Knicks' best chance of winning the series is just kind of outgunning them.
The Knicks are getting some market support when you're talking about the series price, Zach. Some spots were as high as like minus $9. We're kind of floating around that $8 range. There's even some series prices offshore that are as cheap as minus actually less than $7. Do you understand maybe some of the support the Knicks are getting here on the series price?
Well, I kind of thought that when we saw that they were just begging for Knicks money, and I have a feeling they're just getting a ton of it because, it was priced in a crazy lopsided way. I do think the Celtics are going to win this series in 5 or less, maybe 6 or less tops, but I can see why people would believe the Knicks can, keep it close enough to have that number just based off what we saw in the regular season when they were a top 3 team in the East for most of the regular season. I understand why that number might be tempting.
Zach Cohen, senior editor and writer here at VSiN.com. Follow him on X at Betting on X. Smooth Twitter handle, by the way. But as we look ahead to some of these other series, we've got Pacers, Cavs, Warriors, Timberwolves.
Did you do that on purpose?
What?
That's a big point of contention with him and Adam Shine.
I did not know that.
Yeah,
this is news to me.
Adam Schein believes that his Twitter handle is terrible.
Why? What's the rationale behind that?
He says it's the worst handle possible.
You talk about betting and it's on X. I think it makes all the sense in the world. That wasn't even a shot.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into some of the bets that I know you're going to tweet your article out later. In addition to the bets that you have tonight, though, looking at some of these other series, we mentioned in the break, you said that you think this Pacers team could be a little bit more alive than people are giving them credit for. Obviously, they win last night, game 1 in Cleveland. How does the rest of this thing shake out in your mind?
I do think a lot of it depends on the health of Darius Garland. They are, the reports coming out of there are not that toe. Like, it sounds like he is legitimately questionable for game 2. And even if they do force him back, he's a player that has his limitations. He's a really bad defender. So if he's already not moving well, on a good day, if that toe is banged up, he's going to be a player that they can target. And this Pacers team is unbelievable offensively. And Rick Carlisle is a great coach. So they're going to be able to scheme ways for this team to just get open shots. And we saw in game 1, I believe I saw a stat that 80% of the shots that they took in that game were uncontested. So they had a lot of success just finding the shots they wanted. I just don't think that this is going to be a series that's very lopsided. And I know we're heading into game 2 where the zigzag theory that JVT loves talking about is in play. I don't understand why there's a 10.5 available with Indiana. I think that the Cleveland team that has been built needs to be the best team in the league offensively. If Garland's out, they are not that. So I think the Pacers getting this points in game 2 is the right play again.
I would make it clear for audience. I don't like this zigzag theory. I've been trying to play against it, Zach. It hasn't mattered. Like, it doesn't matter what happens. These numbers get inflated, and these teams continue to just bounce back and blow through some of these numbers.
Yeah, I don't get it. I understand desperation in the postseason, and, I understand the Cavaliers really can't win this series without winning this game, but I don't see why they need to win by 10 or more, and in some cases, it's 10.5, or so that's 11 or more. I just don't really understand it.
So how about Warriors Timberwolves? Because this is a Golden State team that everybody was betting before the playoffs. When you get to round 1, they're taking on a 2 seed and beat them as they're supposed to because of what we know about this team. Yet it still ends up going 7. Like, what version of the Warriors do we see against the Timberwolves? And how good is this Minnesota team coming off of the first round that they had against LA?
I think it's going to be a similar version of the Warriors. I just think that there's similarities between the Timberwolves and Rockets that are going to really hurt Golden State. I think that this Minnesota team was right behind Houston when it comes to adjusted defensive rating this season, like pretty much identical statistical profiles. And we saw that the Rockets did a really good job of defending Steph Curry and this Warriors team in that first round. The difference between the two teams is that Minnesota has Anthony Edwards and Julius Randle, 2 guys that can really create for themselves offensively. And I just don't think that Golden State had to deal with that in the first round. Houston, had to play through Alperen Şengün and hope that Fred VanVleet was hitting outside shots. Like, that's not really a great way to, score in the half court in the postseason. The Timberwolves have guys that can do it. They can make tough shots. They're also a very good 3-point shooting team. At least they have been since the start of the new year. I just don't think, this is a series that should have been really priced closely. When I wrote this up last night, it opened at -170 at DraftKings. It has quickly moved, but I have a big play on Minnesota at -170.
What about the length of this series, Zach? Like, I think this can be pretty short. I think the Timberwolves, laying 1.5 games, maybe even laying 2.5 games is a possibility.
Yeah, I think it's going to be 6 or less. I think there's a real chance it's 5. I also think there's a decent shot the Warriors are going to be tired heading into this one. That Rockets series was very, very physical. It went 7 games. Even that game 7 that they won, they won by 20, but it was a physical game for 3 quarters. And this team is banged up right now. Curry's dealing with a bad thumb. Butler did not look the same after that fall he took. I believe it was in game 2. And Gary Payton was dealing with something that kept him out of last game. I just don't think Golden State is heading into this series at 100% health, and it's an older team already. So having to go against another really young athletic team is concerning.
Timberwolves laying 1.5 games +125, laying 2.5 +220. The price is there. Zach, you're awesome. Thank you so much for doing this, buddy.
Thank you, guys.
Zach Cohen, again, check out the article that's up at VSiN.com right now and follow him at Betting on X. And don't change your Twitter name. I like it.
So my recommendation for him, because his name is Zach Cohen, was Zach Cohen, but win is spelled W-I-N.
Oh, that's smooth too. But you'd have to all caps it, right?
Correct.
Yes, just to make it. But I don't mind. I like betting on X.
I thought it was fine too.
It's very clear what Zach does for work and what he's going to be tweeting about, and isn't that all we can?
But Shine does the normal thing that annoys me with people, which is says something's wrong, but then offers up nothing to fix it.
If you want to make sure you have access to Zach's articles each and every day up on VSiN.com, come join us as a pro subscriber. Right now, our annual subscription, usually $240, just $199 when you sign up today. Use our promo code PRO and lock it in at VSiN.com/subscribe.
You're watching Money Moves here on VSiN, the sports betting network.
Back on Money Moves, VSiN, the sports betting network. JVT and Stormy Buonantony with you. Remember, if you haven't checked out Edge Boost, now's the time. The first ever bank account built for bettors, ensuring all gambling transactions are approved. No usage fees, no minimums. You get cashback rewards and 100% approval for any and all betting deposits. Sign up today at edgeboost.bet and use our promo code MONEY. When you do, deposit $25. Edge Boost is going to match that deposit for you. Head over today to edgeboost.bet. That's edgeboost.bet.
Put on your tinfoil hats.
I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. The whole world gone crazy.
For Call Me Crazy, but...
All right, time for Call Me Crazy, but on this Overreaction Monday, and I'm going to start in the NHL. JVT, Call me crazy, but Connor hella bucks the narrative around him in round 2 of this year's NHL Stanley Cup playoffs. Well, listen. Say what you want about the numbers in the playoffs, and they have been bad. He gave up more than 2 times his season goals against average per game in that first round series. He was pulled 3 times in round 1 after not being pulled for a single game in the regular season, and Stevie Wonder could have seen more pucks than he did in St. Louis for those 3 games. That said, after the game yesterday, he said, quote, "This whole series has been a mental grind, ups and downs. Now I build, I continue to build. I'm looking toward the next one." We talked about it earlier. He was exactly the guy you needed in that first overtime and the second yesterday. I think he bucks the narrative in the postseason, and he plays more to his regular season form against the Stars.
I think that's probably plausible, right? I mean, the Stars, I think, are a good team, but I don't know if they have the offensive upside that would maybe push Hellebuck that some other teams in this field would. Should they move on? What's that face for?
I want him to be good so bad. I feel horrible for the guy.
Oh, just from a narrative standpoint?
Yes.
Yeah, who cares?
If
he sucks, he sucks.
Dogged.
I mean, he looked awful at the beginning of the game yesterday. I'm not nuanced in the art of goaltending, but some of the goals that he gave up early, I'm like, brother, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe he does. At the very least, this. When you get off to the start you do as a goaltender, and then you eventually lock into the point where you allow your team to come back and win that game, that at least is a start. And I would think that, yes, maybe it makes a lot of sense that then you would move on in the next round and be able to do it.
And listen, I'm not here to say, oh my gosh, I love the Winnipeg Jets. I'm betting them plus 135 in the series against the Stars. That's not what I'm saying. But especially at home, where, again, I know that the numbers overall have been bad. At home, though, his last 18 games, 17-0-1. Obviously won all of the games at home in this past series. Sure. So at home, I would lean more toward the unders and Jets based on the thought process that Hellebuck gets more to form. Okay, what's your first one?
All right, call me crazy, but Golden State's going to be lucky to win 2 games against Minnesota. Give me Timberwolves -1.5 or minus even 2.5 here in this series. Zach said it very well when we just talked to him. This is a better version. You know, we're in the same age range, but you probably don't have the same cultural background that I do. If I made this reference to humans, he would look at me like I have 3 heads. You probably will too. Pokemon, right? Mm-hmm. The evolution. The Timberwolves are like the next evolution for what the Houston Rockets are, right? Rockets are the first stage. They're Charmander.
Go to Charizard.
Right. Minnesota is Charizard, where you're talking about everything Houston wants to be, Minnesota is. It is a top-tier defensive team with the ability to score on offense, with the ability to shoot, with the ability to score in the half court. They've got the size and the wings to guard the weapons that the Golden State Warriors have in Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler. They're going to be able to muck up this offense yet again. I think this is going to be a very tough matchup for Golden State, and I think the Timberwolves are primed to wipe the floor with this team and send them packing here in a very short series.
Before I react to that, I will say holographic Charmander was my favorite card that I had when I was younger, and I did have that the binder.
Yeah.
With all the slits.
There we go.
I was there, okay?
Finally, somebody I can make a reference and somebody gets it.
My question just about Golden State, and I understand what you and Zach are both saying, especially with the injuries with Golden State here, but considering how much people believed in the star power they have and the experience that they have in the playoffs, it's really strange to me how, I mean, and granted, you haven't been this guy, but all of the people on like national networks and stuff that have been saying the Warriors are a true contender, and all of the people that bet them to win the NBA Finals have, after one round, turned their back on Golden State so quickly.
Yeah, I mean, like, I've always had this kind of question about them. You know, we can go back, we'll pull the tape from when they first made the trade with Jimmy Butler. And one of my big questions was, look, like, I still don't know if this spacing and this offense really works when they're all on the floor together. And you look at some of the lineups they're throwing out there, like the other day when they started Gary Payton, like Stormy, you talk about Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green, Gary Payton, like your two shooters that you had on the floor at one time were either Podziemski and Curry or Buddy Hield and Curry. There's not really a ton of spacing there, and I think the Timberwolves are really going to be able to take advantage of that. Like, I think that this was a team that had its flaws the entire way. Not that they were terrible, but I think you really saw some of that. If the Rockets had any semblance of a half-court offense, they probably win that series. But that's not the case. This is a version of Houston that can deliver on defense while also being able to score on offense. And I think that's going to make a difference.
Okay, I'm going to stick with the NBA and particularly the Western Conference in this one. Call me crazy, but no one is beating OKC in the West. And I know that this isn't a hot take. They're the favorites to win the NBA Finals right now. They've been odds on to win the Western Conference forever, minus 220 right now. But I think back to the conversations that we were having before round one started about all of these other teams who were the contenders. Well, everyone's talking about the Clippers being a big threat, the Lakers and what they have added with Luka. They're gone. OKC's minus 700 against the Nuggets, and no one seems to like Golden State anymore. So who's the biggest threat? On paper, at least by the numbers, it's the Timberwolves, and they're plus 475 in the Western Conference. Is that the only bet to be made, or is there even a bet to be made in the West?
No, I've said this all season long, and I will say it again here. This conference is the Western Conference. It is a Oklahoma City Thunder Invitational. You are all invited to compete, but there is one team that is going to win this thing, and it is the Oklahoma City Thunder. And I'll stick to those guns. Now, I will say this. Minnesota, I think, can't give them a run for their money. Minnesota is very good. They have all the scoring you need. You have the length. You have the size. You have the ability to shoot. Like, there's a lot there. You have the ability to defend. And I think that would be a grind of a series, but I still think that this Thunder team, head and shoulders above everybody else they're going to play. This should be a short series against Denver. And while I think Minnesota could push them, they have the experience, if you will. They made it to the Western Conference Finals last year. I do think that the Thunder are good enough that they're going to be able to beat anybody in their path to get out of the West. Speaking of which, by the way, call me crazy, but the Nuggets are about to get swept by the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Okay.
Look, I think that they have too much. Their perimeter defense is absolutely tremendous. I talked about this throughout the course of the series for the Los Angeles Clippers, and it ended up not ringing true because James Harden did not show up near the tail end of that series outside of Game 6. But they really don't have anybody to defend Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at all. I mean, Christian Brown, good luck. Like, this one's going to be on you, and it's going to be an absolute nightmare. And then outside of that, you still have these other shot creators like you have, like Jalen Williams, Lou Dort as a shooter, and then, of course, Lou Dort as a defender, and the ability to switch amongst elite backcourt defenders, whether it's him, Alex Caruso, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander himself is a good defender. There's so many guys that are going to be able to take their turn defending Jamal Murray, and this is a team in Denver that already lacks for real shot creation outside of Murray and Jokic. I think this is going to be a very short series. I think OKC is going to be able to win this in 4 or 5, but I think they're about to get swept.
I feel like Jokic can steal you one.
Sure.
Like on any given night, he can be the guy that steps up. And I think about even against the Clippers on home court. Yeah, they lose that one early game, but take 3 of 4 in Denver. I feel like they can get one. By the way, that is a plus 210 if you wanted to go look or better on them to get swept. But, you know, I think you're right about that. 4-1 is plus 230, looks like. So there's that also. Yep. I mean, you're right. Like, Jokic is good enough where would I be surprised if he has, like, you know, another 30-20-20 game and they end up like pulling off one and whatever. Like, yeah, absolutely. Back to the NHL for me. I saw on the stats and information page that this is the first time since 2004 that we have had 3 Canadian teams in the final 8 of the NHL postseason. Call me crazy, but not only will a Canadian team not win the cup again this year, but all 3 of those teams get bounced this round. Thoughts? Wow. So we already talked. So Toronto's going to get bounced. Yep. Let's see. Oilers get bounced, and the Jets get bounced. All 3 of them. So right? The Jets and Leafs are both dogs in the series.
So wait, you're
Oilers
rooting
are a
for,
slight
you're
favorite.
thinking Hellebuck's going to buck the trend, but then also that they're going to get bounced?
He's going to be better. He's
so
got to
they're
be
going to lose
better.
like a bunch of like low-scoring contests?
Potentially.
To Dallas? Okay. I mean, I buy it with the market's finally moving in favor of Vegas, as we saw. You know, you and I were talking about that when that opened up, right? Minus 120 for the Oilers. That's starting to see some money in the direction of Vegas. I think they should be favored in the series ever so slightly across the board by the time we get to puck drop tomorrow. You know, the Toronto, I was reading a lot on this Toronto and Florida series. I don't know, man. Like, I feel like Toronto might have a little bit more in them in a series like this against the Panthers than I initially thought. Okay. And might make this a little bit tight. So I don't think you're insane. I do think 2 of the 3 probably get bounced, but I've been gravitating more toward Toronto, at least maybe staying in like a 1.5 or a 2.5 series. There used to be games in this series.
Yeah, I do find that interesting, though, that of the 3, that Toronto is the one that stands out to you. I agree that they're a better team than they're getting credit for, but Florida Panthers just seem so good to me. Plus 403, though, if you did want to do that anti-Canada series parlay, Panthers, Golden Knights, and Stars.
Why would you do that?
Just to win their regular
the 51st
season series.
state of America.
Of course, that's on the way out. We're going to take a quick time out. When we come back, we are going to look at that Florida Panthers Maple Leaf series, as well as some of the other prices that we have up early here in round 2 as that gets underway tonight in the NHL. Don't go anywhere. Hour 2 of Money Moves kicking off next on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.